Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. Duane the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would be embarking on a number of assignments in relatively rapid back-to-back fashion. That intent dictates our experience, and given that everything is its effect now in isness actuality terms, every assignment, operation, and activity we involve ourselves in on the real side, stemming from an intent that they be so, must already be completed, and in reality, the personal self is having revealed to it whatever of the completed assignments makes a sense for it to be shown, or that which is recollected on waking, with all the variables that can impact our real side experience memory retention. For oftentimes my assignments will not begin as you would expect at the opening stages, but generally I find myself already immersed within them, and rather rely on additional real awareness impressions to fill in the blanks, as it were, as though I had missed a movie's start and a friend is filling me in on what had transpired up until that point, and by that same token can the personal self-view of these real side operations be terminated prior to completion, although, as I mentioned, every idea made manifest, every intent established, already is its effect, with all the simulated stages in between. For there would be a brief scene where I was set to embark on an assignment or other. The opening scene would present as a vast building, and I had formed my expedition group, if you will. All preparatory steps had been made, and soon we would be departing on what impressions revealed was a scouting objective of a kind, as though we were seeking an individual or individuals of significance, although nothing would be revealed as to who they were or the reasons for our tracking them down to their current location. The group accompanying me were all predominantly human as far as outward appearances suggested, but for one, and although as a human body type he possessed of very strident, glowing green eyes, he was rather a disruptive character and at one stage I would confront him regarding his behaviour. As it transpired, he actually was a werewolf of a kind, one able to shift from a wolf form to human at will, and this would explain his unnaturally, for a human at any rate, glowing eyes, as though despite being human, this would be the telltale sign that he was in reality anything but. Despite his attitudes, he did seem to be an accepted member of the team, but as I confronted him and determined as to the fact of him being a werewolf, as impressions would afford this detail, he would seize my arm and drag me to another area of the vast building we were in. The scene would fade momentarily, and when restored, I was back among the main group, with the werewolf and the body form I was operating, which had been my usual human Kevin form, but I also now was sporting the same design of glowing green eyes. Impressions revealed that in the interlude between the scenes, that which the personal self hadn't been shown, the werewolf had converted me into one of his kind, as this is a common ability with most breeds of the werewolf body type, although the means by which this was achieved wasn't revealed, but the standard mechanism, however, is a bite or scratch. This didn't seem to faze the group in any shape or form, as though this was a typical behaviour of the werewolf edition, and impressions suggested it wasn't really an issue. For as every effect is based on an idea agreement that manifests it, one has simply to remove the idea cause to be liberated from whatever affliction we may be experiencing. The group were those, on their respective awareness processes, despite a few personal self-attitudes, and all then had the capability, seemingly, to determine any idea afflictions trawled on assignment, and simply identify them and release them where necessary, like wiping mud from our boots. And so, in reality, the werewolf's tendency to convert members of the group that annoyed him was of no consequence. It just seemed to be his mannerism, and we all rather dealt with it accordingly. He was, after all, part of the group. He was on his own process of eventual all-is recognition, despite his quirky personal self-proclivities. The scene would fade, and I would be taking a moment seemingly to seek the assistance of a woman located within a large city, the architecture of which suggesting the earth and of the current time era. I would be accompanied by a number of physical level new friends. I recollect recognizing Jeremy as among them, and as we sought out this particular woman, as we would be traversing past a train track to reach her, several trains passing by would derail and crash. There is the old saying of going off the rails, where one becomes somewhat as operating aside from established and accepted normalcy of behaviour, but also that as all vehicles can represent ideas on the real side, perhaps the ideas as represented by the trains were not especially awareness conducive. In reality, any creational ideas that do not reference the true reality can go nowhere other than via those that attach to them into creation as the effects. Everything creationally encapsulated will self-implode eventually, the macrocosm expression of this being the very simulator that is spiralling toward implosion through the idea construct of the overall consciousness that effects it. Just as well myself and the group were not within the trains, as this would reveal our agreement with the ideas as represented by them, and maybe these were generic idea agreements as harboured by humanity overall, ideas trundling through the human earth recreated landscapes in this experience, most if not all doomed to crash at some stage. The woman we were seeking turned out to be a seer of a kind, endowed with remarkable ability where the analysing of the consciousness of others was concerned. In essence, where she can determine all that we have experienced, lifetime speaking, for all the ideas that have affected our past lives are consciousness present, and indeed could she also reveal that which is yet to be experienced, intense agreements we have set in motion, the effects already so, but we are to as yet experience them from the personal self-perspective view. She revealed much by way of information that impressions revealed were important to receive at this moment, highlighting some of the patterns and routines that were as common threads throughout my lifetimes, and how they may adversely impact my future endeavours if not recognised and kept in check. As she was speaking, as though to emphasise her warning, another derailed train would plough through one of the walls of the very building we currently were within. The scene would switch again, and a group of awareness becoming individuals and myself, very likely the same group that have featured to this point, though I couldn't verify this with a certainty, were positioned in what seemed to be among the clouds in a sky, and manifesting in our midst would be gargantuan body forms, humanoid in appearance, but that presented themselves as gods. All self-proclaimed god beings are simply that, through agreement on vast scales that afford them such an established position. The reptilian life-level gods being examples of those that have amassed the largest extent of agreement on literally a simulator overall consciousness scale. The identities of these god beings wasn't revealed, if they were indeed perhaps the reptilian life-level gods, but impressions suggested they were indeed what they claim to be, beings of extreme agreement allowing creational power, and the group and myself had been summoned by them seemingly. They would extend to us the option of joining them, for it is so that through the process of awareness we become progressively more capable, multi-dimensional, as we are releasing the ideas of consciousness that have presented as restrictions in whatever form this has taken for the longest time, and as we release these ideas we become increasingly unlimited, and where the dark forces and beings of an ill-intended persuasion, which these gods were, as impressions further revealed, will attempt to convince and persuade us to join them, as we will then likely be valuable assets of assist in the continued control of all in the simulator. The scene would fade at that point. The gods had delivered us this option. We had no intention of accepting it, but perhaps this would present as an opportunity, as all confrontation and engaging with other body types will, that as they deliver their proposals and ultimatums, we can deliver ours, that being the opportunity to step up with us, get involved in the life and awareness beneficial operations, and afford them the new you sound and a possibility of recognising the all-is, as is the real purpose, and superseding creation altogether. In the scene that followed, I would find myself with a group of beings, human in appearance, and we were positioned by a vast ocean within a building serving as a base of operations, where we were formulating plans for assignments we were yet to undertake. At one point It was as though the ocean became under the influence of an ill-intended source, that although the building we were in was well positioned from the furthest reaches of the tide, the ocean now became tumultuous. Tremendous waves were formulating that became progressively larger, and the water would not only reach the building, but begin to pose as a genuine threat to it and ourselves. The waves, now reaching hundreds of feet in height, and despite our barricading the doors of the building shut, the force of the ocean would smash through the structure, and we were submerged. The very palpable sensation of nearly drowning, but the group and myself would endure. The impressions were of our soon-to-be executed assignments having disgruntled the Dark Force simulator controllers, and where their method of interference, or to express their disdain, had taken the form of animating the ocean and weaponizing it for our attempted elimination. As this scene followed on the back of our God encounter, that we were continuing with our beneficial assignments, rather was indicative that our turning down of the gods' proposals to join us had rather infuriated them, that they had chosen to take decisive action and attempt to deliver our destruction. The group and myself would now relocate further from the ocean and the reach of the mighty waves, entering a natural environment scene and where present was a river. As we approached, beneath the shallow water that met the river bank were a series of what can best be described as panels, each depicting an image inscribed on the surface. These in fact were portals of a kind, affording access to various locations across multi-dimensional creation. The portal being a rather standard mechanism of dimensional traversing as decided in consciousness and effected as a simulation, and very often I will make use of these created means of transportation, as would be the case here. That this particular location we were stationed within contained these panels, that were one to stand upon them, so they would be transported to wherever they delivered the traveller to, the depictions on their surfaces giving a vague notion of what lay at the other end. This is what we had been planning and deliberating over in the building, which of the portals and creational positions thus afforded we would make use of, some of which would present as more arduous and hazardous ventures, some were unnecessary to even utilize, so we were careful as to our selection. I recollect one as being a conduit to a dark area of creation where the predominant body type was the werewolf, those of an especially ill-intended persuasion. But at that point the scene would switch. I was receiving, as though a partial views of multitudes of assignments, as though either it was unnecessary for the personal self to be shown their entirety at this moment, or perhaps I had failed to recollect and bring back the full extent of my real side activities on waking, my memory vehicle perhaps not as effective for experience filing and accessing as it once was. In a final scene, I would bear witness to a larger group of humans on their awareness process, but it seemed they had been duped by a very charismatic and influential man that had posed as a real guide, and so convincing was he that the group had been unable to see through the facade. Generally, the real awareness, as part of the isness everything reality that animates through all consciousness, with access then to every idea behind the simulation we experience, can determine the veracity and authenticity of the beings in our midst. And so, either this group of aware beings were not receiving these impressions for whatever reason, or perhaps disregarding them in favour of their personal self-convictions as to the deceptive man's guide-presented identity. The fake guide was not only ill-intended, but interestingly operating in the form of the actor Ian McShane, and as he had assuaged the group as to his guide credentials, he was able to manipulate them to the extent that they were adhering to his every whim and dictate. I mentioned earlier that the dark forces in all their expressions will target new friends and those on their awareness processes as through the abilities they have accrued, which automatically will occur in a tandem with an awareness process, which is a releasing of all idea restrictions and limitations that renders the individual progressively more capable and unlimited. So if new friends can be turned, either consciously agreeing to do so, or inadvertently, as was the case here, being duped by very likely a shape-shifting reptilian presenting as a guide, they can become as valuable dark force assets. For indeed, as the group were in complete compliance with who they thought was a guide, he had formulated them into two distinct groups, and somehow convinced them to be locked now in conflict. He had them in states of utter confusion and bewilderment, and through the abilities they could muster through the awareness process they had been embracing, they would be able to bring extraordinary destructive powers to bear. One of the groups would be transformed from human to giant stone beings that favoured the use of what can best be described as ice magic, the ability to blast energy, but of a nature that was of an extremely low temperature. The other group would utilise destructive energy quite the opposite, that which was fire-based, and their forms would become that of enormous, Godzilla-sized bipedal lizards. The fake guide not only had convinced these two groups of beings to be locked in perpetual conflict, but that their battle would at some stage take place on the physical planet Earth, as was his scheme and dastardly plot. For the dark forces are desiring to bring about depopulation events for humanity, and I have been revealing the various potentialities that are the varied mechanisms by which this can be executed. This then was another cultivated option, a group of former awareness becoming humans who hadn't consciously turned to the dark side but had been deceived, and where lay the possibility of their conflict of the giant stone beings of ice and the fire-emitting lizards spilling out onto the physical level Earth. And although they had no interest in being the delivery mechanism of destruction for humanity, their focus and attention was solely on the eradication of each other, so vast were they in size, miles in height by my estimation, and so destructive were their respective fire and ice powers, that as I was now shown a view of this potential situation, the stone giants and lizards were very effective in laying waste to the earth and the decimation of humanity, as intended by the ill-intended being who had masqueraded as a guide. I say potentially, for although every idea is its effect now, including this scenario, consciousness design dictates that only certain of the ideas installed in consciousness will be physical level manifested at any given moment. That which is currently as human experience is the idea held to in most prominence over all others, as though a particular movie preferred over all others on the shelf, and for the movie to be exchanged for another, so another idea must become prominent, and although the newly embraced idea is also its immediate effect, with the time and space ideas also a consciousness embedded, so a cause processes but gradually to its effect, just as we must sit through a movie that already is complete on the disc. And only if the idea is retained as that which is most prominently embraced to its effect, will the culmination point be experienced physical level-wise. Ultimately then, the species decides its experience, based on which ideas installed in the collective species consciousness is held to, in agreement of prominence, over all others, and long enough to be physical level exacted. And so, the dark forces are cramming as many ideas as conceivable, through the various means of human consciousness installation, in the hopes that at least one of them will be retained long enough to be actualized, and they will have then their desired human depopulation genocide event. This final scene then was simply another idea being added to the mix, but as its execution involves the collaboration of awareness becoming individuals, as they were in actuality deceived and had no intention of being pawns for the controllers, the possibility exists that they may at some moment recognize the deception and withdraw agreement consent from being potential unwitting agents in Earth's destruction. And there my night of real side shenanigans would conclude.
Another good one from Kevin, and we see effects happening. Okay, you see it through what I see is through the campaigns, presidential campaigns affecting the world, ideas, etc. The next war that's happening, Iran and Israel and all this nonsense, plus everything else that's going on, the hurricanes, the destruction, the fires, it's a constant. And so again, all this is taking place because there is agreement to it. And you see the masses, they are still in support of whatever. So yes, in Kevin's experience where he sees these people deceived accordingly, so things have to make sense. It has to make sense. Doesn't make sense. So with what life is, with the sun shining, with the air you breathe, doesn't make sense. So it's always best to, if you're unsure, and that's okay, because with the personal self, we have to deal with that all the time. Stop, be now, let's start over. Let it all go. Let everything you know go. Let it all go. Yeah, everything. Relationships, everything. Likes, dislikes, whatever. Start each moment new. Keep practicing this until you really see what's going on. Because all life is, it's an isness to be recognized. And while in creation, right now, what's happening is it's all based upon, basically it's all based upon distractions, is what it is. Others wanting agreement. This gives them support for what they want, just like the presidential campaign. These people are campaigning, they're out there talking, making speeches, silly words, all nonsense, to get people to agree to them, to support them, and do for their lives, because they're unaware of how to really do for themselves. So all they can do is try to convince others because they're afraid. They're afraid to be real because it's a huge process to be real, to, recognize what all life is. That's huge, and it's ongoing. And as I've come through this in my lifetime, I see that as one becomes more aware, it becomes more of a challenge always to see what you cannot see. And at what point does a person stop? Well, there's no such thing because it's always becoming more aware. This is the endlessness life is. It's not a matter of saying, oh, I have freedom now and everything's fine. No, that's personal self idea. Just like the sun shining, all life is awareness. It's a very interesting position to be able to recognize, and you might say adhere to or stick to or stay with. Because again, we must, with the personal self here, we must constantly make adjustments because we have this personal self and we need this personal self. We need it, and at the same time, we have to deal with it. So we teach the personal self to have no attitudes, to be as all life is. So this is what we teach it so that it's okay and we can utilize it. Because for me, I like the challenge here as I'm being here as this process of cause and effect is happening in this simulator, basically to the bitter end. Whatever, I'm fine with that. I'm not thinking that, oh, gee, I want to be saved. I want to go here. I don't want to be here in more lifetimes or whatever. No, it's not about that anymore. That's all baby brain stuff. It's about helping others become aware because that's how life is. It's all about becoming more aware and forgetting yourself and planning out, you might say, creating ways to help others become aware. That's real. Forgetting yourself altogether. The sun shining does not consider itself at all. It just shines. It's being real. This is what's so cool. And again, this is the hardest part for all of us to go through, is to let that personal self alone. So it doesn't matter, just like in Kevin's experiences, who you're coming up against, good, bad, or indifferent, or whatever. It's not about that. Everything is okay. And you just let those people make the choice. So, of course, we're not going to let people on the Skype that disrupt things. But at the same time, we want to give everybody a chance, even if it's to Callum God, to step up and have some kind of agreement with us. In other words, that he has the intent to become more aware realistically, not just for his own personal gain. There becomes a difference. So this is where the intent is involved. And so everyone goes back and forth many, many times. We all have, until we finally get this adjustment. And it's just a whole lot. So again, you have to be real. You have to give yourself many years. If it's 1,000 years, that's what it is. Doesn't matter. All is here and now. So this is the fun part. At least you are aware. Everything goes into awareness. That's the best part. It's not that you're just a soul or it's your higher self and all these things. These things are fine. We utilize these things, but it's awareness. It's the awareness life is. That's the best part. And so you've arrived. And so now it's the bigger challenge to recognize more and to creatively provide something and keep going. Yeah, that's the big challenge.